Good evening. This is Mae Brussell on KAZU FM in Pacific Grove, California. You had it made and you blew it. That was Wendy Williams of the Plasmatics. There's an article about her in People magazine this week if you're interested. She's an interesting person, and you might read a little background about her and what she believes in and what she does. As she says in the song, I played it before, you had it made and you blew it. It's like I talk about Henry Kissinger almost every week on some part of my program, and Fritz Kramer and Ronald Reagan tomorrow night will be giving a speech or a press conference in which he will announce his intention for, I suppose, the bloodbath in Central America. I was saying 2 years ago that John Lennon was murdered before Reagan became president, a few weeks before the inauguration, so that there would be no chance of peace demonstrations as he proceeded to Central America for the bloodbath. Now, if you want to call me, I will take questions. We participate this first half hour, and then I have World Watchers from 8 to 9. 375-3082. You can call. This is Mae Brussell. Any questions that you have or anything that you want to share on the air? I've been trying to point out certain TV programs that are on that are of interest. If you have a tape recorder, I don't want to compete with myself, but there's a program, Nightline, Jessica Savage, rather, not Nightline, is going to do Klaus Barbie tonight and again Thursday night. The time cuts over into our program, World Watchers, but she'll be on Channel 54 tomorrow night. Here, I'll take a call and then get on to some subjects that were in. Hello? They hung up. That was quick. Wednesday at 9 o'clock, this coming Wednesday, the Summer of Judgment, the Senate Watergate hearings, Channel 9 at 9 p.m. I wrote a long article for The Realist. The Senate Select Committee is part of the cover-up, and I really should go back and share that on the air with you and go over those points again. It's since that hearing that was a cover-up, just as the Warren Commission was a cover-up, a terrible cover-up of the real crimes of Watergate. I understand Rolling Stone has an advertisement this month, Paul Krasner's 3 realists, his last realist, the ones that I did. Why was Martha Mitchell kidnapped? The Senate Select Committee is part of the cover-up, and the SLA as the CIA are on sale for $35. Someday those will be collector's items. I did have the Martha Mitchell story reprinted, but the original realists will actually, I believe, be collector's items someday, because if you take those 3 articles that I did for The Realist and cross-file or see the names that were mentioned, it does cover the whole broad era. Okay, I'll take a call now. Hello?
Hi, Mae?
Yes.
A couple of weeks ago, you mentioned Grace Kelly, and I missed a few shows. I don't know if you've talked about her yet or not, but can you give us an overview of what you feel has been, what happened to her?
What happened to Grace Kelly? Mm-hmm. Yes. Let me see. Are you here locally?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I didn't want to run up a long answer if you're paying a toll call. Okay. Grace Kelly was a person...
Hey?
Yes.
I'm getting feedback, so I'm going to hang up and I'd like to listen to your answer. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know why you're getting the feedback. Oh, turn your the radio down. That's why.
Okay.
And just listen on the telephone.
All right.
Grace Kelly was a very controversial person in terms of being what I call the connecting links. There's certain people who are like the elbow and the knee of the social scene. Cary Grant is one of those, Grace Kelly is one of those, and they cover the base, say, of organized crime or the syndicate in Pennsylvania or the Hollywood connections or the royalty or the Vatican, and they hit all the bases. They are the respectability that can go between and around all of those scenes simultaneously, where, say, Meyer Lansky isn't entertained by the Queen in England. But Grace Kelly can be where people are, like Roy Cohn, are associated with Lansky, and then she can be at prominent social events. And Grace came from Philadelphia, main line. Her family had made arrangements for her to marry the Prince of Monaco. The Vatican had arranged that. And they wanted to give respectability to this little principality, and they also wanted an heir, because if the Prince Rainier didn't have a son, it goes back to France. As soon as they stop having children over there, Monaco doesn't exist as a private country. And it's the meeting ground of all the monarchy that were deposed as various countries were overthrown after the Russian Revolution.
and the monarchies meet in Monte Carlo, and it's also the base of people like Aristotle Onassis, who kept his yacht there, who went back and forth to South America in narcotic dealing and used his ship oil tankers, bringing in narcotics all over Europe. And the table there, the gambling table, was the headquarters, a lot of international scenes going on in monarchy, and the exchange of weapons to overthrow the communists that had deposed the monarchies. Zaharoff had moved there, and Samuel Cummings of the CIA, he's from London, and he's also from Philadelphia, along with Grace Kelly, and he keeps his offices in Monaco. So there's an article on the stands this past week. It may go off tomorrow. The new articles come out on Tuesday, like the Examiner, Globe, and Star. And there's evidently a book coming out on the monarchies or people, and it tells about the arrangements of her marriage. She's told who to marry, and her father agrees with a priest in Monte Carlo who advises the prince, and they arrange with another member of the Vatican down in Washington, and they go up to Philadelphia, and in like 1 or 2 hours, Grace is engaged. And she also has political connections to various people in Hollywood that are agents of the CIA, the Defense Department, and under the role of actors or guise of actors or actresses. And Grace, at the time that she was killed, the very day that she was killed, Licio Gelli had been arrested, and he's still in Switzerland. He hasn't been sent to Italy. And he was involved with a fascist organization called the P2, and they're trying to turn Europe into a fascist state that Adolf Hitler had. Mr. Gelli worked for Mussolini in Italy and formed the Brown Shirts and has been a fascist all his life. And he left Europe after the war and was brought back in the 50s by the monarchy of London, the Duke of Kent. And Grace was involved in making movies at the Vatican at the time. And the Vatican at that time was under a lot of pressure because of scandals of organized crime and millions of dollars missing. And Michael Sindona, who was the investor for the Vatican, had been arrested and was in New York in a jail. And the scene around her was collapsing, the crime syndicate, and banks were collapsing. And Grace was one of these pivotal people that went back and forth. Now, one of the things I'll have on World Watchers tonight is the chronology of somebody like Alfred Bloomingdale when Vicki Morgan sued him in the summer of '82. Roy Cohn was hired as attorney, and the first person Roy Cohn saw after he got the job was to fly to Monte Carlo to be with the father of the lawyer Prince Rainier, and Rainier would soon be a widower within a few months. Everything fell, in fact, if I have time tonight, I'll do a chronological order of certain dates. So the point is that if people have been used as couriers, or if they hear too much, they have to be offed at that time. There's been a big escalation of narcotics around the world, and Bashir Gemayel's family in Lebanon have been a part of that, the Falange Nazi Party, again, the Christian Party in Lebanon. And the same day that Grace died, Bashir Gemayel died. And now his brother is in the United States this week. He had a party yesterday for 500 relatives in the United States. And they're a big pocket in Lebanon of narcotic traffic all over the world. So that there wasn't one reason that she was killed. There were a lot of reasons. And I did write an article for the National Examiner on Grace, and there's been a lot since. If you send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, I'll send you the article that I did, one article that I wrote on Grace Kelly, and maybe if you read it, and if you're interested sometime, you can get the broadcast, like when I'm on the air. It's taped. That's why I call them tape number. I number them, and then these tapes are available, and you can buy those broadcasts, like the Grace Kelly broadcasts.
Okay.
And like I'm doing part 3 tonight on Vicki Morgan, and a year from now people will want to know about Vicki Morgan, so they can get tape 1, 2, and 3, and I leave them off to be duplicated. I don't do it, and I don't make money off of it, but I have them on tape so people can study it if they want.
So you did an article for the Examiner?
The National Examiner that sells, the newsstand like the Star and the Globe. In fact, Cliff Leindecker is the fellow I do work with there and write with him, and he wrote a book 8 years ago. His first book was called Psychic Spy, and the fellow that he wrote about, Vicki Morgan, was with the day before she was killed. And that was in the newspapers this week, and she had told this fellow that she was afraid of her life, and he told her to get out of her house.
I don't know who Vicki
Well, I'll tell you, what you have to do is listen every week and don't miss 1 week. And then you'll get caught up. This is part 3 of Vicki Morgan. And if you listen, just set that time aside, because then these names make sense. You know, the events don't make sense unless you invest a certain amount of time in understanding their relationships to each other. It's hard to go back over them individually. It's just an overview, you see. Mm-hmm. But if you listen, you'll get the overview, and then you can study more particulars if it interests you.
So what you're saying is Grace Kelly was a courier.
She was a courier, yeah, and she was in the Vatican at the time, allegedly making that Easter movie and Christmas movie, but it was in the fall of September of 82. At 1982, and in June of 1982, the chief banker for the Vatican, who was involved with several $100 million of their money missing, was hung in London. And she was going back and forth at a time when 8 people related to the Vatican and their banks had died.
He was hung?
Yeah, he was hung in London. His name was Roberta Calvi. And the chief God's banker, he was called the first God's banker, is Michael Sindona. There's several books out on Michael Sindona, on God's banker and the pontiff. There's new books out at the bookstores on these people. And Sindona is in a jail in New York. He's wanted in Italy on a murder charge of ordering the murder of a judge. In Italy, he was opening up his case and for taking $45 million out of the Franklin National Bank in New York. So he was the largest investment banker for the Vatican up to that point. In fact, he built the Watergate Hotel and a lot of other things around the world. And with him in jail, Roberta Calvi took his place, and then Calvi was hung in London. And that was in June of 82, and then in September, Bashir Jamal and Grace were killed, and I just got a bunch of new articles this week on the Monte Carlo connections to Licio Gelli and Roberta Calvi. So it's like singling out a bumblebee out of a nest and trying to describe their interrelationship. Mm-hmm. So if you follow it every week, it'll get more clear.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
That's a long answer to a question, but it's interesting. At one point, people begin to want to understand the phenomena of being a courier or being killed because you know too much, and working for the agencies and then being wiped out. This is so common. People are expendable and they do the job, and then when they're in the way or know too much, they're off. I'll take another call now. Hello?
Hi.
Yes?
I was wondering what you thought of Dick Majan's budget cuts this year.
Oh, my God. Dick Majan's budget, where do you want to start?
Well,
which do you think is the worst, the Coastal Commission?
I think the worst is cutting out National Public Radio. It seems to me that that's a real distinct way of cutting out people's freedom of information.
Well, yeah, of course, I have strong feelings about National Public Radio. I don't think they've done half of what they should have done all along, like KQED or Channel 9 or their news service. I mean, through the Watergate, through the House Select Committee on Assassination, through the real problems, the things that I talk about on this program, and this is my 13th year on the air, you have never heard discussed on National Public Radio. You know, the song that I played before the program began, Wendy Williams singing You Blew It, you had your chance and you blew it.
Uh-huh.
If they were taken off for something they really believed in or helped people who are doing the work expose it so that they can survive and prove that they're doing a service because they are, opening up, not night and day. You can have public television, you can have your ballets and your operas. I mean, how many Nutcrackers and Carmens do you have to see? You know, why can't they have a news service where they do exposés, such as, say, Mother Jones? They have a brilliant article in July on the Vatican, the subject I said about before, and Mr. Reinhard Galen, it was Chief of Intelligence, and James Angleton, and Mr. William Casey, and the CIA that runs the Vatican runs the CIA, and we should have separation of church and state. What did National Public Radio do that it deserved to live?
Well, it just seemed to me that the funding for it was a necessary part of keeping an alternative opinion alive.
Okay, what did you really get, though? I remember the WBAI or KPFA, the Pacifica stations. You can't talk about these exposés at all. You can talk about reggae, you can talk about AIDS, you can talk about the peripheral. The minute you get on these subjects, you're cut off. I was on there for 3 or 4 years. The program that I have here was played in New York City on WBAI for 3 years until during Watergate, I was a darling of the left, of the counterculture, because I was pecking at Nixon. When I got to the really heavy part about Adolf Hitler's agents putting Nixon into power, they pulled me off there right away.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I have tapes, and I have friends in New York who taped all those programs and all the calls, and a person said, "Fox is this you're saying about, Hitler," take off there, and even the Village Voice, which is a so-called liberal paper, Mr. Coburn wrote an article, Up the Maypole, what is Bob Fast doing with Mae Brussell, talking about these things, and that was the liberal paper of New York City. So that when you really get to something, you say, well, look, here's where they met, and these are the places they went, and these were the deals, and this is why we're in a bind, and we're, going towards fascism. I can't talk at KPFA on these subjects. So what I'm saying is, what did they do to survive? What did you hear there that was worth, say, get a good book on the Pontiff or the Vatican or these exposés? There's thousands of books every year coming out. What there was unique that you needed?
Well, I guess they really blew it. It just seems like that was a source of funding that could have really been put to good use.
That's exactly what they did. They blew it. Like Wendy says, you had your chance and you blew it. And I get letters from organizations and people that I've appealed to and tried to work with or tried to turn on. And they asked me for this and that. And years ago, I used to support everything. And once I realized that there was a real problem in this country and that we better put our energy towards understanding this problem, these people all split it off. So I have a box I call the Crybabies. The Rosenbergs, they send me money. The anti-nuclear send me money. The help, find out the cause of AIDS. No matter what it is, there's a list of 30 or 40, get rid of Jesse Helps, help the American Indians. Hey, you can support everything, and you're not going to solve the problem until you really get to who is behind this.
Yeah, that's really true.
And if they help support the researchers, and I don't mean myself, I mean all the researchers, the guy up in Capitola, Tom Davis, has a bookstore just for investigative work of these exposés on the CIA, the FBI, the Freedom of Information, the Nazi connections, the Interpol connections, and they can allow people like that on the radio to talk about what is available for you to read. They don't have him on or book dealers on talking about books exposing the system.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think they are partly, I know at Pacifica, when I was taken off the air, and Bob Fast was taken off and fired immediately after these 3 years where we had a really big thing going, and it was publicly supported, but the basis of the money came from a Vera Foundation, which turned out to be part of the Kaplan Fund and the CIA. Our government has what they call an appearance of a left, where many people like Jerry Rubin worked with the CIA, or different people that looked like the left, and they gave the appearance like we have a confrontation of left and right. And the truth is that many of those stations were really supported. The backbone of them was the government. See, and it's just like, I say, a demonstration of anti-nuclear, 1 out of every 5 is an agent. And they become the organizers, they get the mailing list go into the police departments, like the computers at LAPD, and then they go to 50 states. The people aren't willing to sit and have conversations and read books to understand how the system works. And they don't have to figure it out. Other people have figured it out, but they don't spend time reading the books.
So do you think that this is a technique to try and keep people in this country divided and more or less confused about what the crux of the problem really is?
Well, I think people are divided, and I think they are confused, but I don't think they want to invest their time in finding out. I got the address of 2 alternative newspapers that I'll put on the air because then I went on the tape for this evening, the broadcast for other people, and I'll put on a few minutes. But they're alternative papers in San Francisco, they're in L.A., and people could get those. A guy named Jonathan Marshall has a newsletter up in the Bay Area. Penn Jones in Texas has a newsletter. There are good people doing things, but none of them are allowed on national public radio, the kind you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
And what kind of programs did you like on there?
Well, the KPFA News is something that I've been listening to every day, and I was wondering what the fate of that is going to be.
Well, I don't know. I remember there was a conference at the Silmar about 2 years ago on alternative radio, and various people from different stations were there, and there was a fellow that made sure that I didn't get on this KSAN up in San Francisco, and he was crying and he was broke, and they were talking about the dilemma. They didn't have any money as we're getting close to this fascist state. And I said, boy, did you ever deserve it? You know, the way you pulled me off, I was telling truths, and you could have checked the matter at a dialogue instead of a blanket, no Mae Brussell, see? And the head of KSAN, he died an untimely death. The head of KFAT died, and that station folded, and all the alternative stations like the LA Free Press, the Berkeley Barb. Is it coincidental the whole country collapsed of alternative media? The people behind it didn't have the guts to support the issues or force issues and test the people who are running the station.
Yeah.
I mean, call me next week. I'll tell you what, if you like the news, listen to KPFA, write down what you think are the 10 most important news stories that they bring up this week. And make a list like I write sometimes, like the night Vicki Morgan was murdered. I listed 10 news stories before they mentioned her death, okay? Write down the top stories that they put on the news thing that you listen for 1 week. And then tell me if we cover them on World Watchers or what is the comparison with what they're putting out.
Like in the order that they're...
Just what you think, write them down in the order that they carry them. See, and then tell me Mr. Habib went here, Mr. Kissinger went there, Mr. Reagan said this, the head of this group, came down with AIDS, this ship of Greenpeace was released from the Soviet Union. Tell me what they're talking about. I think it's gibberish.
Yeah, I think I'll do that.
Okay, because before I prepared the program for tonight, I had on my kitchen table about 40 of the top stories that I would like to put on but won't have time to do tonight, and I'll type them up and do them later next week or something, eventually get to them, because next week there's 40 more. But I'll take what I consider the 40 top stories and check them off with what they had, and maybe we can have a dialogue next week and see if there's any similarity.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think the study of the media is long overdue on what are our freedoms and who is really out there fighting to tell the truth.
Yeah, definitely that needs to be done. It seems like the quality of the mass media is really diminishing.
Well, the quality of the mass media depends upon the mentality of the people. You have to be ever vigilant. There's no guarantee that if you're born free, you're going to stay free.
Yeah, that's true.
So the quality is us. Like if Reagan's the president, he's us. He's all the people that voted for Anderson or the Peace and Freedom or the independent parties that didn't realize the menace that Ronald Reagan was and didn't roll up their sleeves and say, I'll take the lesser of two because this guy is mean. See, and so they split everyone I know who's so pseudo-liberal, split their votes into all these little bits and pieces, just like in London. 10 parties split each other up, or 9, and Margaret Thatcher wins. How come they can't figure out, let's 9 of us get together and get her out, and then we'll decide what we do?
Yeah, that's a better way of doing it, but it's also a lot scarier to do it that way.
It's not scarier because the handful that control the country are in a minority. There are fewer of them, a handful of them run the country, and the others stay home or don't vote. They say, well, I don't want to vote because they're both bad. They're not equally bad. Jimmy Carter didn't send in the troops to Iran to keep the Shah there. He didn't send in the troops down in Nicaragua to keep Somoza in. He wouldn't recognize Chile or Argentina or South Africa because of the human rights. He wasn't perfect. I can tell you 80 things he did wrong, but there was some sense of priority.
That's true. He's a far cry better than Reagan.
And then they said, well, he's wishy-washy. I'd rather have somebody who changes his mind than somebody who never changes his mind.
Yeah, especially if they think like Reagan does.
If they think like Reagan does, then, when you get an oink, sure you don't change your mind. But what are you going to do with these kind of people, you know? You have to vote them out. Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate your call. And keep a list and call me next week. And let's do this. Maybe the listeners will like to hear it. Put the top stories after you listen for 5 or 6 nights. Then tell me what you think were the top 10 stories that really deserve to be on the air. If people funded that station, what would they get?
Okay, yeah, that sounds like it might be a really good thing to do.
And see if they get their money's worth. In the meanwhile, support Kazoo, because this is the station that lets you know the truth. Okay, thanks for calling.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to have to take off the switches for the telephone calls because we don't have time for any more calls. That was a long answer, but I think it's interesting to go at length, and maybe we'll find out what National Public Radio is, in fact, doing and see if it's worth preserving. Let's see what they're saying to those nice people. And now it's KZU-FM, Pacific Grove, California, and it's Mae Brussell. We'll start with that disclaimer.